Daniel Ross wiped down the counter of his small food stall for the third time that evening. The trading station Vertex 7 was quieter than usual, with most vendors already closed for the night cycle. He had been running this modest establishment for nearly 5 years now, ever since he retired from his merchant shipping days. The station hummed with its usual background noise, a mixture of life support systems and distant conversations echoing through the corridors. As Daniel prepared to close up, he heard a strange sound coming from behind his stall. It was a soft scratching noise, followed by what sounded like whispered chirps. He grabbed his portable light and walked around to the back where he kept his waste disposal unit. 3 pairs of glowing eyes stared back at him from the shadows. Daniel froze, his heart racing. The creatures were small, roughly the size of house cats, with scales that shimmered even in the dim light. They had elongated snouts, tiny wings folded against their backs, and delicate claws that were currently rummaging through his garbage. They looked like miniature dragons from old Earth stories. The moment his light hit them, they scattered, disappearing into the ventilation shafts with surprising speed. Daniel stood there for a moment, wondering if he had imagined the whole thing. But the overturned garbage container and small claw marks on the metal floor proved otherwise. The next evening, Daniel deliberately left his back area dark. He prepared his usual closing routine but made sure to place some leftover grilled meat near the garbage area. Then he retreated to his stall and pretended to work on his inventory logs. Within minutes, he heard the soft scratching again. Slowly, carefully, he peeked around the corner. The 3 creatures had returned. They approached the meat cautiously, sniffing it with obvious suspicion. The smallest one hung back while the other 2 investigated. Finally, the boldest one took a bite, and within seconds all 3 were devouring the food. Daniel watched in fascination. These were not mindless scavengers. The way they moved, the way they communicated with each other through soft chirps and body language suggested intelligence. They took turns eating, with the larger 2 making sure the smallest got its share. That was family behavior, he realized. These were children. Over the following weeks, Daniel established a routine. Every evening before closing, he would prepare a plate of food and leave it in the same spot. The dragon children, as he had started calling them in his mind, appeared like clockwork. They were clearly malnourished, their scales dull and their movements sometimes weak. Whatever they were, they needed help. His fellow vendors noticed, of course. Station life was too close-knit for secrets. "You feeding those things again?" asked Pavel, who ran the tech repair shop 2 stalls down. "You know that's asking for trouble, right? Could be diseased. Could be dangerous." "They're just hungry," Daniel replied, arranging fresh vegetables on his display. "Look at them. They're kids." "They're aliens," Pavel corrected. "Unknown aliens at that. Nobody knows what species they are. Security would probably want to know about them." Daniel had considered contacting station security, but something held him back. The way the creatures fled at any sudden noise, the way they constantly looked over their shoulders, suggested they were hiding from something. Or someone. By the 3rd week, the dragon children had grown comfortable enough to appear while Daniel was still present. They no longer fled when he moved slowly and kept his voice soft. He started talking to them as he prepared their meals, telling them about his day, about the interesting customers who visited his stall, about life on Vertex 7. The boldest one, which Daniel privately named Courage, would creep closest. It watched everything Daniel did with intense curiosity, its golden eyes tracking every movement. The second one, slightly smaller with darker scales, was more cautious but equally interested. Daniel thought of this one as Shadow. The third, the smallest with the lightest colored scales, always hung back. This was Shy, the one who seemed to startle at everything. One evening, as Daniel set down their meal, Courage did something unexpected. Instead of immediately eating, the creature approached Daniel's hand. Very gently, it pressed its snout against his palm, making a soft trilling sound. Daniel held perfectly still, hardly breathing. The scales felt warm and smooth, almost like sun-heated stone. "You're welcome," Daniel whispered. Courage tilted its head as if considering his words. Then it made the trilling sound again, and the other 2 joined in, creating a harmony that sounded almost like singing. From that night forward, the barrier between them seemed to dissolve. The dragon children would wait near his stall even before closing time, watching him work. Courage began investigating his cooking equipment, fascinated by the heating elements and the various utensils. Shadow would bring small objects, shiny bits of metal or wire, laying them near Daniel's feet like offerings. Even Shy started approaching more readily, though it always stayed behind the other 2. Daniel noticed they were growing. Not quickly but steadily. Their scales became brighter, their movements more energetic. Good food was making a difference. He started varying their meals, testing what they preferred. They seemed to like almost everything, but they went crazy for anything with a spicy seasoning he used. Other vendors continued to warn him. "Those things are getting bigger," said Chin from the noodle stall. "What happens when they're not so cute anymore? What if they're dangerous?" But Daniel saw no danger in them. He saw 3 intelligent beings who had been abandoned or lost, trying to survive in a harsh environment. He saw children who needed someone to care about them. One evening, about a month after their first meeting, something remarkable happened. Daniel was closing up, placing their usual meal on the ground, when Courage approached his utensil rack. With careful deliberation, the creature began moving items around. Daniel watched, confused at first, until he realized what was happening. Courage was arranging his cooking spoons and small tools into patterns. Lines and curves. Letters. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he recognized Galactic Standard Script, the common written language used throughout the station. The word spelled out was simple: thank. "You can write," Daniel breathed. "You understand language. You're not just intelligent, you're educated." All 3 dragon children looked at him, and in their eyes, Daniel saw something that changed everything. He saw fear. He saw hope. He saw a plea for silence. They were hiding. Not just surviving, but actively hiding from someone or something. And they had just revealed their greatest secret to him, trusting that he would keep it. Daniel knelt down slowly, making himself less imposing. "I won't tell anyone," he promised quietly. "I don't know what you're running from or why you're here, but you're safe with me. I give you my word." Courage approached him, followed by Shadow, and finally even Shy crept forward. They pressed against him, their warm scales touching his arms and legs, and made that harmonious trilling sound together. Daniel Ross had spent decades traveling the stars as a merchant. He had seen hundreds of species, traded with countless civilizations, and prided himself on his understanding of the galaxy's complexity. But in that moment, sitting behind his modest food stall with 3 mysterious dragon children seeking his protection, he realized his most important journey was just beginning. He had no idea who they really were. He had no idea what dangers might be searching for them. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would keep feeding them, keep protecting them, and keep their secret for as long as they needed him to. In the vast, complicated, often harsh galaxy, sometimes the most important thing a person could do was show kindness to those who needed it most. Even if those in need had scales, wings, and glowing eyes. Especially then. After the night when Courage spelled out thank, everything changed between Daniel and the dragon children. They no longer hid their intelligence from him. Within days, they began actively participating in his daily routine at the food stall. Courage was the first to truly help. During the morning prep, the creature watched Daniel chop vegetables with intense focus. Then, using its small claws with surprising dexterity, it began arranging ingredients into neat piles. The movements were careful and deliberate, showing an understanding of organization that amazed Daniel. Shadow proved to have an eye for presentation. When Daniel arranged food on plates for customers, Shadow would adjust items slightly, creating more appealing visual layouts. Customers began commenting on how attractive his dishes looked, never realizing a small dragon was responsible for the artistic touches. Even Shy contributed, though in quieter ways. The smallest dragon child would clean surfaces with scraps of cloth, wiping down counters and organizing utensils. The creature worked when customers were not looking, always careful to remain hidden from direct view. Daniel found himself talking to them constantly, explaining what he was doing and why. "This spice combination works because the heat balances the sweetness," he would say while seasoning meat. "Customers on Vertex 7 come from 40 different species, so I need to offer variety." The dragon children listened to everything. Courage began using utensils to spell out simple words regularly. Good when tasting food. More when they wanted extra portions. Help when offering assistance. Communication between them grew easier each day. One afternoon, during a particularly busy lunch rush, Daniel found himself overwhelmed with orders. He was juggling 3 different dishes when he heard a soft chirp behind him. All 3 dragon children had emerged from their usual hiding spots and were working together. Courage operated the warming station, keeping finished dishes at the right temperature. Shadow arranged plates with garnishes. Shy cleaned used utensils and kept the workspace organized. They moved like a coordinated team, anticipating needs before Daniel voiced them. When the rush finally ended, Daniel slumped against his counter, exhausted but grateful. "You 3 are amazing," he said. "Thank you." Courage spelled out new word on the counter using condiment containers. Then carefully arranged more items. Family. Daniel felt something tight in his chest. These children, whatever they were, had chosen to trust him completely. They were not just revealing their intelligence anymore. They were telling him what he meant to them. That evening, Daniel made a decision. "Show me where you live," he said after closing. "I want to see your home." The dragon children exchanged glances, communicating through soft chirps and body language. Finally, Courage nodded, a distinctly human gesture they must have learned from watching Daniel. They led him through the station's corridors, staying to the shadows, until they reached a maintenance access panel. Shadow triggered the release mechanism with practiced ease, and the panel slid open. Inside was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for Daniel to squeeze through. He followed the children through a maze of passages that most station residents never knew existed. These were the old maintenance tunnels from when Vertex 7 was first constructed, long since abandoned for newer, more efficient systems. After several minutes of crawling and climbing, they emerged into a larger space. Daniel activated his portable light and looked around. The room was perhaps 20 feet across, filled with discarded equipment and forgotten supplies. But the dragon children had made it their own. In one corner they had gathered soft materials, scraps of fabric and cushioning foam, creating makeshift beds. In another area they had collected various objects, shiny metal pieces, colored wires, interesting tools. A third corner held what appeared to be food storage, showing they had been scavenging long before Daniel found them. What struck Daniel most were the walls. The children had scratched marks into the metal surfaces. Some were clearly writing practice, attempting to form letters and words. Others were drawings, simple but recognizable images of stars, ships, and faces. Dragon faces, adult ones, drawn with obvious care and longing. "You miss your family," Daniel said softly, studying the drawings. "You're trying to remember them." Shy made a sad, musical sound that needed no translation. These children were orphaned or lost or taken from their home. The drawings were their way of holding on to memories that were fading. Daniel sat down on the cold floor and all three children gathered around him. "I'll help you," he promised. "I don't know how yet, but I'll figure this out. First thing, we need to make this place more comfortable." Over the following days, Daniel began bringing supplies to the tunnel home. Thermal blankets to keep them warm. Better lighting so they could see properly. Food storage containers to keep their provisions fresh. Medical supplies just in case. He also brought educational materials, data pads with basic information about the galaxy, language lessons, and history. The children absorbed everything with desperate hunger. They would spend hours studying the data pads, their eyes glowing in the dim tunnel light as they learned about different species, cultures, and worlds. Courage showed particular interest in technology and engineering. Shadow loved art and design. Shy focused on languages and communication. But Daniel's most important task was research. Every night, after the children fell asleep in their makeshift beds, he would return to his quarters and search through every database he could access. He looked for any species matching their description. Small dragons, scales, wings, intelligence, ability to write. He found nothing. There were dragon-like species in the galaxy, certainly. The Dracorians had wings and scales but were massive, the size of small buildings. The Sorin were reptilian but walked on two legs and had no wings. The WRMS of Sector 9 were serpentine with no limbs at all. None matched the children he was caring for. Daniel expanded his search to missing persons reports. Surely someone was looking for 3 lost children. He checked stations across multiple sectors, reviewed diplomatic incidents, scanned news reports about kidnappings or disappearances. Still nothing. It was as if these 3 beings did not officially exist. No one was reporting them missing. No one was searching for them. How was that possible? One evening, about 2 months after first finding them, Daniel sat with the children in their tunnel home. Courage had been practicing writing more complex sentences on a datapad. "Can you tell me where you came from?" Daniel asked gently. "Do you remember your home?" Courage's claws moved slowly across the datapad screen. The words that appeared made Daniel's blood run cold. "Taken. Ship. Left here. Scared. Someone took you," Daniel said, his voice tight with anger. "They brought you here and abandoned you." All 3 children nodded, their eyes reflecting fear and pain. Shadow took the datapad and wrote, "Cannot go back. Danger." "Danger from who?" Daniel pressed. "Who took you? Who are you hiding from?" But the children would not or could not answer. They huddled together, making distressed sounds. Daniel realized he was pushing too hard. These were traumatized children, and demanding answers would only hurt them more. "It's okay," he said, gathering them close. "You don't have to tell me everything. Just know that I'm here. Whatever you're running from, we'll face it together when you're ready." That night, Daniel made a silent vow. He would protect these children no matter what. He would find out what happened to them and where they came from. And whoever had hurt them, whoever had abandoned 3 intelligent children on a station to starve and hide in darkness, would answer for their crimes. But for now, he would simply be what they needed most. Someone who cared, someone who saw them as people rather than things, someone who would not abandon them no matter how mysterious or complicated their situation became. In the quiet of the maintenance tunnel, with 3 dragon children sleeping peacefully against him for the first time since their ordeal began, Daniel Ross understood that sometimes being human meant extending family beyond your own species. It meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. It meant loving without needing all the answers first. Karen Mitchell had worked as a security officer on Vertex 7 for 8 years. In that time, she had seen smugglers, con artists, illegal traders, and every variety of trouble that accompanied a neutral trading station. She prided herself on noticing things that others missed. Which is why Daniel Ross's food stall had caught her attention. The retired merchant was unremarkable in most ways. He kept to himself, ran an honest business, and never caused problems. But 3 months ago his behavior had changed. He started buying far more food than usual. He lingered near his stall during off hours. And most notably, small dragon-like creatures had been spotted around his establishment. Karen had ignored it initially. Stations attracted strays of all kinds. But then she received a routine notification from Central Security Database about unidentified species sightings. When she cross-referenced the descriptions with reports from Daniel's area, alarm bells went off in her mind. She began surveillance, discreet and professional. What she observed fascinated her. The creatures were not mere animals. They moved with purpose and intelligence. They helped Daniel with his work, showing coordination and understanding that suggested sapience. And Daniel treated them like children, not pets. Karen spent 2 weeks gathering information before making contact. She approached Daniel's stall during a quiet afternoon, ordering a simple meal to appear casual. "Business seems good," she commented, watching Daniel prepare her food. "Can't complain," Daniel replied, his tone friendly but guarded. Karen noticed his eyes flick briefly toward the back area of his stall. "I've noticed you have some interesting helpers," Karen said carefully. "Small ones. Dragon-like." Daniel's hands stopped moving for just a moment before resuming their work. "I don't know what you mean." "Daniel, I'm not here to cause trouble," Karen said quietly. "But I'm security. It's my job to know what's happening on the station. Those creatures you're protecting, they're sapient, aren't they?" Daniel set down her meal and looked at her directly. His expression showed fear but also determination. "If they are, they're also hiding from something. Something that terrifies them. I won't put them in danger." Karen respected that loyalty. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I need to show you something. Can we talk privately?" 20 minutes later, they sat in Daniel's small quarters while the dragon children remained hidden in their tunnel home. Karen pulled up her data pad and displayed a series of reports. 3 months ago, she began, the Draconis Sovereignty reported a catastrophic incident. They're an ancient empire, incredibly powerful but very secretive. They almost never interact with outside governments. "I've heard of them," Daniel said. "Dragon people, right? But massive, the size of transport shuttles." "Exactly. Which is why what I'm about to tell you seemed impossible at first." Karen swiped through several documents. The Sovereignty reported that 3 of their Imperial children disappeared during a diplomatic mission to Sector 7. They've been searching frantically ever since. Daniel's face went pale. "Imperial children? You mean royalty?" "Not just royalty," Karen corrected. "These weren't minor nobles. According to very limited information the Sovereignty released, these were the direct offspring of their star Empress, the ruler of their entire civilization." She pulled up images, carefully sketched descriptions from Draconis sources. Small bodies compared to adults. Scales in gold, silver, and bronze tones. Wings not yet fully developed. Intelligent but young, unable to fully defend themselves. Daniel stared at the descriptions and Karen saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "The children you've been feeding and protecting," Karen said gently, "match these descriptions perfectly. Daniel, you've been caring for the most sought-after missing persons in multiple star sectors." "That's impossible," Daniel whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "They're so small. So vulnerable. How could they be royalty from a powerful empire?" Because they're children, Karen explained. The Draconis grow throughout their lives. Adults are enormous but juveniles are small. Vulnerable. Which is exactly why this kidnapping was so devastating to them. She pulled up another file, this one marked with high security clearances she probably should not have accessed. The sovereignty believes they were taken by political rivals during a peace summit. The children were being transported under heavy guard when their ship was attacked. All guards were killed. The children disappeared. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. They were taken and brought here to die. Abandoned on a station where no one would know who they were. That's my theory, Karen agreed. Vertex 7 is neutral territory. We don't keep detailed records of every being who passes through. Perfect place to dump 3 kidnapped children where they'd never be found. Why haven't you reported this? Daniel asked suddenly, looking at Karen with suspicion. If you know who they are, why haven't you contacted their people? Karen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because I watched them, Daniel. I saw how they react when strangers get too close. They're terrified, traumatized. And more importantly, I saw how they react to you. She pulled up surveillance footage from near Daniel's stall. It showed Courage, Shadow, and Shy working alongside Daniel, comfortable and happy. Then it showed their reaction when another vendor approached unexpectedly. All 3 had fled instantly, hiding until only Daniel remained. These children have been through hell, Karen said. They were stolen from their family, their guards were murdered in front of them, and they were left to die alone. You're the first person they've trusted since that trauma. If I just call the sovereignty and have them show up with warships, what do you think will happen? Daniel understood immediately. The children will panic. They'll think they're being taken again. Exactly. This situation requires extreme delicacy. Karen closed her datapad and looked at Daniel seriously. I'm going to contact the sovereignty. They deserve to know their children are alive. But I'm going to do it carefully and I'm going to make sure you're involved in the process. Those kids trust you. They need you. What if the sovereignty doesn't see it that way? Daniel asked. What if they just take them back by force? Then we'll deal with that problem when it comes, Karen said firmly. But from everything I've read, the Draconis value family above all else. Their Empress has been searching desperately for 3 months. She's not going to do anything that might further harm her children. Daniel stood and paced his small quarters. This is insane. I'm just a food vendor. I can't mediate between an ancient empire and 3 traumatized kids. You already are, Karen pointed out. You've been doing it for 3 months without knowing it. Daniel, those children chose you. Of everyone on this station, of everyone in the galaxy, they decided you were safe. That means something. What do I tell them? Daniel asked helplessly. How do I explain that their mother is coming? We start slow, Karen suggested. First, I make contact with Draconis diplomatic channels. I provide proof that the children are safe and being cared for. Then we set up communication protocols. We give the Empress a chance to understand the situation before anyone shows up with warships. Daniel thought about Courage, Shadow, and Shy sleeping peacefully in their tunnel home. He thought about the drawings on the walls, the dragon faces they were trying not to forget. He thought about how they pressed against him for comfort when frightened. They miss their mother, he said quietly. I've seen the pictures they draw. They're trying to remember her face. Then we'll help them get back to her, Karen promised. But we'll do it right. We'll do it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize them. Can you trust me on this? Daniel met her eyes and saw genuine concern there. Karen was not just doing her job. She cared about what happened to these children. All right, he agreed. But I'm with them every step of the way. No one approaches them without me present. No one takes them anywhere without my agreement. If the sovereignty has a problem with that, they can arrest me. Karen smiled slightly. Something tells me the Empress is going to be far too grateful to even consider that. You saved her children's lives, Daniel. You gave them hope when they had none. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Fair warning, this is going to get complicated. Very complicated. The Draconis sovereignty doesn't do anything small. When the Empress arrives, and she will come personally, this entire station is going to know about it. After Karen left, Daniel sat alone in his quarters for a long time. His simple life as a food vendor was over. He had stumbled into galactic politics at the highest level, and there was no backing out now. But when he thought about 3 small dragon children who had trusted him with their safety, who had chosen him as their protector, the choice was simple. He would see this through no matter what came next. The Draconis warship appeared in Vertex 7 space without warning. One moment the sensors showed empty space, The next moment a vessel the size of 3 city blocks simply existed where nothing had been before. Every alarm on the station screamed at once. Daniel was at his stall when the emergency broadcasts began. All residents remain calm. We have an unscheduled diplomatic arrival. Security personnel to stations. This is not a drill. Karen appeared at his side within minutes, slightly out of breath. She's here. The Empress came personally. I thought she'd send ambassadors first, but she came herself. Daniel's stomach dropped. The children. I need to get to them. He abandoned his stall and ran toward the maintenance tunnels, Karen close behind. They found Courage, Shadow, and Shy in their hidden home, huddled together and trembling. The children could sense something was wrong. They made distressed chirping sounds, their scales rippling with anxiety. It's okay, Daniel said, kneeling beside them. I need to tell you something important. Your mother is here. She's been searching for you. She's come to bring you home. The reaction was not what he expected. Instead of joy or relief, all 3 children pressed themselves against the wall, their eyes wide with terror. Courage positioned itself in front of the other 2, small wings spread in a protective gesture. They're afraid, Karen observed quietly. They don't understand that she's here to help. Daniel's heart broke as he realized the depth of their trauma. These children had been torn from safety once before. The idea of being taken somewhere, even home, triggered their deepest fears. Nobody is going to force you to do anything, Daniel promised, gathering them close. I'll be with you the whole time. Your mother just wants to see that you're safe. An hour later, the meeting was arranged in one of the station's diplomatic chambers. Karen had insisted on neutral ground rather than the Draconis ship. The Empress had agreed to come alone, without guards, which apparently was unprecedented and caused quite a stir among her crew. Daniel stood in the chamber with 3 dragon children hiding behind his legs. He had never felt more out of his depth in his entire life. He was a simple food vendor about to meet one of the most powerful beings in known space. The door opened. Star Empress Sareth entered, and Daniel understood immediately why her people called her that. She was magnificent. Easily 30 feet long from snout to tail, her scales shimmered with colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Her wings, folded against her body, could have wrapped around a small spacecraft. Her eyes glowed with ancient wisdom and desperate hope. But what struck Daniel most was not her power or her majesty. It was the expression on her face when she saw the children. Pure, devastating love mixed with anguish. My children, she breathed, her voice like music and thunder combined. She took one step forward. All 3 dragon children pressed harder against Daniel, making frightened sounds. Courage spread its tiny wings again, as if it could possibly protect its siblings from this enormous being. The Empress stopped immediately. Daniel watched her face transform as understanding hit her. Her children, her own offspring, were afraid of her. They don't remember me, Sareth whispered, and Daniel heard her voice crack with pain. 3 months. They were so young. They've forgotten their own mother. They haven't forgotten, Daniel said gently, finding his courage. I've seen their drawings. They picture you every day trying to hold on to memories. But they're traumatized, Your Majesty. They were taken violently. They watched guards die. They were abandoned to starve. They've learned that the world is dangerous and unpredictable. Sareth's massive form seemed to shrink somehow. She lowered herself to the ground, making herself as small as possible, though she still dwarfed everyone in the room. I failed them. I should have protected them better. This is my fault. No, Daniel said firmly. The fault belongs to whoever took them. You're here now. That's what matters. But they fear me, Sareth said, her eyes fixed on her children. How do I reach them when my own presence terrifies them? Daniel thought about the past 3 months. He thought about patience, about small gestures, about earning trust one moment at a time. The same way I did. Slowly. Gently. By letting them come to you instead of reaching for them. Sareth looked at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. You are the human who saved them. Karen Mitchell told me everything. You fed them when they were starving. You sheltered them when they had nowhere to go. You protected them when the galaxy seemed determined to harm them. I just gave them food and safety, Daniel said. Any decent person would have done the same. No, Sareth corrected quietly. Most would have reported them to authorities immediately. Most would have treated them as curiosities or problems. You treated them as people. As children who needed care. My intelligence reports say you are a simple merchant. Unremarkable. No special training in childcare or xenobiology. I raised 2 daughters, Daniel admitted. They're grown now, living their own lives. Maybe I just remembered what children need. Any children regardless of species. Behind him, Daniel felt courage shift slightly. The small dragon was peeking around Daniel's leg, looking at the Empress with cautious curiosity. "May I try something?" Sareth asked, directing the question to Daniel, not her children. She understood that right now he was their trusted guardian. "Of course." The Empress began to hum. It was a low, melodic sound that resonated through the chamber. Daniel recognized it immediately because the children made similar sounds. This was a Draconis song, something instinctive and primal. Shadow and Shy emerged slightly from behind Daniel, their attention caught by the familiar melody. Courage took a tentative step forward. Sareth continued humming, not moving, barely breathing. She was letting them approach at their own pace. Daniel realized he was watching one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy submit herself completely to the needs of 3 frightened children. Courage took another step. Then another. Shadow followed, more cautious. Even Shy crept forward, drawn by something deep and biological. "I sang this song to you when you hatched," Sareth said softly, still humming between words. "All Draconis mothers sing to their children. It's how we bond. Do you remember? Deep inside, do you remember this song?" Courage was halfway across the room now. The small dragon made a tentative chirping sound, trying to match the melody. Shadow joined in and then Shy, creating a harmony that made Daniel's eyes water. "Yes," Sareth encouraged, her voice thick with emotion. "You remember? You know this song. You know me." But when Courage got within 10 feet of the Empress, the small dragon suddenly stopped. Fear flickered across its features. It looked back at Daniel, uncertain. Daniel understood. The children wanted to trust their mother, but trust had been broken too severely. They needed more than instinct and memory. They needed time. "It's okay," he told Courage. "You don't have to rush. Your mother isn't going anywhere." Sareth's face showed heartbreak, but she nodded in agreement. "Your guardian is right. I will wait. Days, weeks, months if necessary. I have searched for you across a dozen star sectors. I can wait a little longer for you to feel safe." She slowly stood, her movements careful and non-threatening. "Perhaps," she said to Daniel, "you would permit me to visit again tomorrow? I could come to wherever you have been staying. Your home is more familiar to them than this formal place." "The maintenance tunnels," Daniel said. "It's not fancy, but it's where they feel safe." A flash of pain crossed Sareth's face. Her children, heirs to an empire, had been living in abandoned tunnels. But she controlled her reaction. "Then I will visit the tunnels. Thank you for caring for them. Thank you for teaching me how to approach my own children." As the Empress left, Courage, Shadow, and Shy rushed back to Daniel. They pressed against him, seeking comfort. But Daniel noticed something important. They were looking toward the door where their mother had exited. They were thinking about her. The first fragile threads of reconnection had been formed. Now came the harder part, weaving those threads into something strong enough to heal a broken family. The next morning, Star Empress Sareth arrived at the maintenance tunnels wearing no crown, no royal insignia, and accompanied by no guards. She had to squeeze through the narrow passages, her massive form barely fitting, scraping scales against metal walls. For a being who commanded fleets and ruled star systems, the indignity must have been immense. But she never complained. Daniel waited with the children in their small home. They huddled nervously as they heard the Empress approaching, the sound of her movement echoing through the tunnels. When Sareth emerged into the open space, she looked around at the makeshift beds, the scattered drawings on walls, the simple supplies Daniel had brought. Her eyes lingered on every detail, and Daniel saw her struggling with emotion. "This is where my children have been living," she said quietly. "While I slept in palaces, they slept on scraps of foam in an abandoned tunnel." "They made it home," Daniel said. "That takes courage and resourcefulness. You should be proud of them." Sareth looked at him with surprise. "You defend them even to their own mother. You truly have become their guardian." She settled onto the cold floor, folding her massive body as compactly as possible. The children watched from behind Daniel, curiosity beginning to overcome fear. "I don't know how to do this," Sareth admitted, and Daniel heard vulnerability in her voice that probably few beings ever witnessed. "In Draconis culture we emphasize strength, dignity, power. I was raised to project authority. But my children don't need an empress right now. They need a mother, and I've forgotten how to be just that." "Then let me show you what I've learned," Daniel offered. Over the following days, Daniel became an unlikely teacher to an empress. He showed her how to sit quietly and let the children approach at their own pace. He demonstrated how small gestures like preparing food together could build trust. He explained that vulnerability was not weakness but a different kind of strength. The turning point came on the third day. Daniel was teaching Sarah to cook one of the meals the children loved. She struggled with the small cooking implements, her massive claws too large for the delicate work. She became frustrated, her scales rippling with irritation. "I cannot even do this simple thing," she said, her voice tight. "How can I care for them when I cannot manage basic tasks?" "Ask them for help," Daniel suggested. Sarah looked at him in confusion. "Ask them? But I am their mother. I should provide for them, not burden them. Asking for help isn't a burden. Trust. It shows them you see them as capable beings, not just children who need constant protection." Sarah considered this. Then, hesitantly, she turned to Courage, who had been watching from nearby. Could you show me how to use this tool properly? My claws are too large, but yours are perfect for this work." Courage's eyes widened. For a moment the small dragon didn't move. Then, slowly it approached. With careful movements, Courage demonstrated how to hold the utensil, how to make precise cuts in the vegetables. Sarah watched intently, following the lesson with complete seriousness. "Like this?" she asked, attempting to mimic the movements. Courage chirped an encouraging sound, then actually guided the Empress's claw into the correct position. The small dragon was touching its mother, helping her without fear. Daniel saw tears forming in Sarah's eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. Shadow and Shy crept closer, drawn by the scene. Soon all three children were helping their mother prepare the meal, working together as a family. The Empress, who commanded billions, took instruction from three small children with grace and genuine gratitude. "This is what I forgot," Sarah said softly to Daniel while the children arranged plates. "Draconis culture taught me to be strong, to never show weakness, to always be the authority. But children don't need authority figures. They need parents who can be real with them." "Strength has many forms," Daniel replied. "It takes strength to admit you need help. It takes strength to be vulnerable. What you're doing right now, learning from your own children, that's real courage." As days turned into weeks, the transformation was remarkable. Sarah began visiting daily, each time spending hours in the tunnels. She learned to play their games, to understand their chirping communication, to read their moods and needs. She told them stories about their home, about the Draconis sovereignty, about the family waiting for them. The children slowly remembered. Not just intellectually but emotionally. They began responding to her presence with excitement rather than fear. Courage would rush to greet her when she arrived. Shadow would show her new drawings. Even Shy would curl up against her massive form, seeking comfort. One evening, about a month after Sarah first arrived, something magical happened. The children were tired after a long day, and Sarah began humming that ancient lullaby again. This time, all three children climbed onto her, nestling into the spaces between her scales, finding the spots they had occupied as infants. Sarah wrapped her wings around them, creating a protective cocoon, and continued her song. Within minutes, all three were asleep, safe in their mother's embrace. Daniel watched from nearby, and Sarah met his eyes over her sleeping children. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. The actual departure took another 2 weeks to arrange. The children needed time to understand they were going home, not being taken away. Daniel helped them pack their few possessions, including all their drawings. Sarah insisted those memories, painful as they were, should be preserved. On the day of departure, the entire station gathered to watch. The Draconis warship waited in space, but Sarah had arranged for a smaller shuttle to dock directly at the station. No grand ceremony, no formal protocols, just a family going home. Daniel stood at the docking port with the children. They were excited now, eager to see their home, but also anxious about leaving. "You'll visit, right?" Courage asked, using a datapad to spell the words. The small dragon had become quite proficient at written communication. "If your mother allows it," Daniel said, looking at Sarah. "Allows it?" Sarah said with surprise. "I insist upon it. You are family now, Daniel Ross." "Our family. The Draconis have a tradition for beings who save royal lives. We call them bond kin, closer than friends, as important as blood relatives." She produced a small medallion, its surface covered in intricate designs. "This is my personal seal. It grants you access to any Draconis world, any facility, any resource. More importantly, it tells my people that you are under my direct protection. You will always be welcome in our home." Daniel accepted the medallion, feeling its weight. "I'm just a food vendor." "You are the person who taught an Empress how to be a mother again," Sarah corrected. "You are the person who saved 3 lives when you could have done nothing. You are the person who chose compassion over convenience. That makes you extraordinary. The children hugged Daniel one final time, making their harmonious trilling sounds. Then they boarded the shuttle with their mother and Daniel watched them leave. Karen stood beside him as the shuttle departed. You changed history, she said. The Draconis sovereignty will remember this forever. The human who showed them that love transcends culture and species. I just fed some hungry kids, Daniel said, but he smiled. 3 years later, Daniel still ran his food stall on Vertex 7. But now, his stall had a reputation across multiple sectors. Beings traveled considerable distances to eat at the place where the famous story happened. And once every few months, a Draconis shuttle would dock at the station. 3 young dragons, now much larger and studying at the finest academies in their empire, would visit their bondkin. They would help at his stall just like old times. They would share meals and stories. And sometimes their mother would come too, squeezing into the maintenance tunnels that had once housed her lost children, sharing quiet moments with the human who had taught her that being strong sometimes meant being soft. Daniel's daughters visited once and were amazed to find their father casually cooking with alien royalty. How did this happen? His eldest daughter asked, watching Courage expertly season a dish while Shadow arranged garnishes. I fed some hungry kids, Daniel said simply. Everything else just followed from that. On the wall of his stall, Daniel kept one drawing the children had made before leaving. It showed a human figure surrounded by 3 small dragons, and above them all, a massive dragon with wings spread protectively. Underneath, in careful letters, were the words, "Family finds you." The galaxy was vast and often harsh. Empires rose and fell. Wars were fought over resources and territory. Politics divided species and worlds. But in a small food stall on a neutral trading station, a simple human merchant had proven something important: that compassion could bridge any gap, that kindness could heal any wound, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was not weapons or wealth or authority. Sometimes it was just one person willing to feed hungry children and ask nothing in return. And that simple act of human compassion had changed everything.